A young man and his grandfather sat alone on their boat in the middle of the lake of Neandor. The water stretched endlessly, its surface unnervingly still. There was no breeze, no birds, no insects. The grandfather leaned back with a grunt, his gaze lost in the emptiness. When I was a lad, this lake was teeming with life. Now look at it. Not an animal in sight, and the water's black as a moonless night. The young man rolled his eyes. Then why did you bring me out here? I could have been making a profit right now back at the shop. I hear there are foreigners in town looking for enchanted weapons. Leave it to the young to speak foolishly. I've told you since you were a lad why this place is special, the grandfather said with a slow shake of his head. The young man let out a chuckle as he looked around the lifeless expanse. The seraphim? Oh yes, how could I forget? Angels of light. You've only been grumbling about those overglorified nymphs my entire life. Mind your tone, boy, the grandfather warned, his voice stern and unamused. Before the arrival of mankind and the feral folk, this lake was home on earth to the seraphim. When I was young, I made a promise with one and... Before he could finish, a glow of light descended between them. It was silent at first, like a ripple through air itself. Then in a sudden blinding flash, the light dispersed. As the brilliance faded, something lay between them, a golden medallion, gleaming against the dark wood of the boat, its sapphire stone pulsing with a faint glow. The grandfather picked it up with trembling hands and eyed it carefully. His fingers traced the familiar curves and etchings. Well, I'll be, his voice cracked slightly. It's just as I remember it. A single tear budded in the corner of his eye, and he wiped it away quickly before looking at his grandson. He smiled softly and placed the medallion into the young man's hands. This medallion was my grandfather's, he murmured. He passed away while I was still very young. It was the last thing I had of him, and it became one of my most cherished possessions. It still is. But a promise is a promise. The young man turned the medallion over in his palm, its weight oddly reassuring. The intricate patterns seemed to shimmer as he studied them, almost as if they were alive. What did you promise? He asked, his voice quieter now. The grandfather exhaled, his gaze fixed on the medallion. In exchange for the blessing of the medallion and keeping it safe from a lifetime of damage, I promised to grow old, wise, and live a life of purpose, to be the best grandfather for my grandson.